Now, another reason the eyes are so important, and the reason that I don't want you to gloss over this little, the extraocular muscles, you do need to know this. Besides what Funk was saying, you can, in some way, shape, or form, the eyes are connected to basically every part of the brain. So if you really know what you're doing, you can use the eyes, one, just as a diagnostic tool to pretty much pinpoint any brain lesion, mostly with just the eyes. I mean, of course, you would never want to just use the eyes, but you could if you wanted to. And then if you can use them as diagnostic tools, that means you can use them as treatment also. All right? Now, everybody was pretty much here last week, right? Was anybody not? All right, well, the people that were, you remember when I said when we were doing the light reflex test, why we needed to know if it was an afferent block or if it was an efferent block? Because if you're testing for the midbrain and you see this pupil not really constrict and you're thinking, oh, it's because of a weak midbrain, and you start rehabbing that midbrain and it was really cool, it was just that the retina was messed up and that's so the light wasn't getting back there. Now you're ramping up a perfectly healthy midbrain, screwing that person up. Well, the same is true with the eye muscles. If you are doing an eye exam and you say, okay, well, it looks like their medial saccades look like they were slow. So that could be A, B, C, D. But really, it was the medial rectus was just weak and it couldn't get the eye over there. So you've got to know what the ocular muscles are doing so you can test for them to make sure that that's not where the problem is and it's really whatever the problem you think it is in the midbrain. All right, so let's try to make this easy. There's 4 recti and there's 2 oblique per muscle or per eye. Okay? All recti muscles attach to the anterior part of the eye, and the obliques to the posterior. Okay? Now let's say this is my right eye. So you have the superior oblique, the superior rectus attaches to the anterior part of the eye. So when it contracts, what does it do? It elevates the eye, right? Easy. Inferior oblique attaches to the anterior part of the eye, contracts, depresses the eye.
Rectus.
Huh? Rectus, sorry about that. Yeah, if you hear me say something stupid, tell me. Medial, brings it in medially, lateral rectus, lateral. All right? Those are easy. Now, the obliques, superior oblique, it comes through medially and it latches around the trochlea. All right? So it comes like this.
Which eye?
All right. All right? So it comes in medially, hooks around the trochlea, and connects to the posterior part of the eye. Okay? So if I'm looking, everything we're talking about right now is if I'm looking neutrally. If I'm looking neutrally, and I were to pull this muscle, what is it going to do? It's going to rotate the eye inward, right? So it's going to have medial torsion. Does everybody see that? Pull it, medial torsion. All right? Now, the same with the inferior oblique. It doesn't have a trochlea, but it basically is coming out of the medial wall, and it's connecting to the back of the eye. So now when I pull on this one, external rotation. Everybody see that? Okay. Is anybody lying? Everybody saw that, right? All right. Now, I'm explaining why, but while I got the cup here, I'm going to go ahead and show you this. So when the eyes are neutral, and I'm pulling on this superior oblique, my right eye, it's turning it, it's in toward you. Now, if I were to look this way, to my left, and this eye turns, starts looking medial, now the eye is lined up with the muscle. What is the muscle going to do? It's going to just straight up depress it. Everybody see that?
Straight up.
Straight up.
Actually, straight down.
Yeah, straight down. Don't miss the
All right. So we're neutral. We got internal rotation. If I look this way, out of my head, my eyes, and it lines up with the muscle, now I'm pulling on it. It's suppressing. Depressing. Okay. Same would be with the inferior oblique. Neutrally, external rotation. If I look in line with the eye muscle, now what's it doing? Elevating. Straight up. Elevating. All right? So we see that. Okay? So, neutrally. All right, so that's neutrally. Now we have to talk about what their primary responsibilities are. Okay? What I mean by that is, when we're looking neutrally, everything I just showed you is their primary responsibility. The recti, superior, moves it up, inferior down, medial, lateral. Obliques, intorsion and extorsion. Superior is intorsion, inferior is extorsion. Now, when I look to the right, notice that one eye's abducting and one's adducting, right? So I got one looking medial, one looking lateral. The primary responsibilities change when I do that, okay? Now, before I go any farther, I want you to write these 4 things down. And from these 4 things, you should then be able to easily figure out what the primary movers are. 1, when I look in a particular direction, one eye is always going to be a rectus, and the other eye is always going to be an oblique. Okay, so one eye has to be a rectus, one eye has to be an oblique.
In regards to elevation and depression.
That just one eye is going to be a rectus and one eye is going to be an oblique. So just
We're going to look anywhere but center.
Anywhere, right now we're talking about anywhere but center. So if I'm looking right or to the left, okay? Now, if one eye is a superior muscle, the other eye is an inferior muscle, okay? So we got one's always a rectus, one's always an oblique, or the other's an oblique. One's superior, one's going to be inferior. All right? Now, third, the eye that's abducting, so the eye that's looking lateral, is always going to be a recti muscle, a rectus muscle. The eye that's looking medial is always going to be an oblique. Lateral eye, always a rectus, medial eye, always an oblique. And lastly, and we'll get to this part last, all superior muscles are intorters and all inferior muscles are extorters. Say again? All superior muscles are intorters. So for your torsion, they rotate inwards. And all inferior muscles are extorters. Now, knowing those things, we're going to see if you can tell me what the primary movers are for each eye position. Now, once you kind of get this down a little bit more, you can see that you'll actually be able to even break it down to less than those 4 things. But with the first 3 things, so if I'm looking to my right, okay, let's start with this eye. If I'm looking to the right and I'm looking up, okay, let's start with this eye. With your things that you have written down, your 3 things, is this eye going to be a rectus muscle or is it going to be an oblique? Rectus. Is this eye going to be a superior or is it going to be an inferior? Sorry, I forgot to say this part earlier. Realize that the recti muscles are always going in the direction of what they're called. So a superior rectus is moving the eye superiorly, right? The inferior rectus moves the eye inferiorly. Oblique muscles do the opposite. So remember, it's attached to the back of the eye. So a superior oblique is actually going to be a depressor. And the inferior oblique will be an elevator. Okay? So the recti are always going to move the eye in the direction of the name that is given. And then obliques would be the opposite. So I'm looking up and to the right. We said this is a rectus. Would it be a superior rectus or an inferior rectus? superior. Okay? So that means this eye has to be what? Inferior. So now you can look and see that you can actually take it and break it down even farther to make it less to remember. If somebody's looking to the left or the right, all you really need to know is, the way I do it, what is the lateral eye doing? Because I know the lateral eye is always rectus, and I know it's always going to be in the direction of the name of the muscle. So if I'm looking up and to the right, it's superior rectus. If I'm looking down to the right, it's inferior rectus. So if it's inferior rectus, that means this has to be a what? Superior oblique. Alright? So if you've got those things down, there's almost nothing to remember. It's really easy to look at the person, just remember however you want to do it, with the medial or lateral. I like lateral. What's their lateral eye doing? It's superior rectus, this is inferior oblique. Okay? Now, to the point number 4 that I put on there, as far as superiors always being intorters and inferior always being extorters. I showed you how, if the eyes are neutral, why the superior oblique is an intorter, because it's attached to the back of the eye, right? So it intorts. Now, if I'm looking this way, and my right eye goes here, and we say now the superior oblique, now its primary job becomes the depressor. So then what does the superior rectus, what's its job if it's not the primary, the inferior rectus. If it's not the primary depressor now, what is the inferior rectus' job? So the eye moves this way. Now look how it's lined up with the inferior rectus. So inferior rectus normally depresses. I look this way. Now when I pull on it, it extorts. So same thing, if I look inside, the inferior oblique is going to make primarily elevation. So now, since the superior rectus is no longer the primary elevator, now the way it's lined up is going to be medial rotation. I just want you to see why it's this way, but you don't really have to remember this. All you have to remember is that, what's the lateral eye doing? It's a rectus. The opposite is going to be the oblique. Okay? But I just want you to see why, just as far as the torsion goes, if I'm looking medial and both the superior and inferior oblique become primary elevator suppressors, why the superior rectus and inferior rectus now become the primary intorters and extorters. Did everybody see that? All right. Now, on your sheets, with those things I told you, minus, would you want me to do it on here on this part?
Well, go to the next chart, Frank.
Well, I don't want to see the answer. Yeah. All right. On this chart, minus the innervation, I'm going to talk about that in a second. Fill out the rest of this chart. Having me only told you those 4 things, you should be able to figure out. The first one, superior rectus. Again, don't do the innervation. Where are all recti muscles inserted? When the eye is neutral, what's its primary job? And when it's adducted, what's its primary job? And when it's abducted, what's its primary job? You should be able to fill that out pretty quickly.
And if you want, you can work with a partner and make it collaborative issue.
It'll take a couple minutes, see if you can fill that out.
Bo, when you have an oculomotor lesion, is there certain muscles that get affected more than the others, or is you usually just kind of lose kind of function of all muscles equally?
When you say, so ocular motor, now when you say that, do you mean like oculomotor nucleus, or because the oculomotor nerve splits into a superior and inferior.
Right.
And the superior does the superior rectus and the lid, and then the inferior does everything else. So if it's before that, then you get the classic
exactly. You talk about
kind of out
and
down.
because the other muscles are still pulling on it.
Right.
And then you would also
So you get out and
wouldn't be surprised to
export.
see.
No, import.
So say primary findings.
you would get from the lateral rectus pointed out,
Right.
and then you have
Because now it's
The superior
That's what I was
oblique.
thinking.
yeah, so you would have
I know.
But then I said, it took me so long to think about it, so I'm over
And
time.
also, probably smack.
Yeah, I saw him say some shows, too much, but.